normally like it's kind of the mindset of like, this isn't the best way to think, but it's what's worked for me. It's like grind now, and like if you have plans later that day, it's like you got to get it out now. So that
Mhm.
way like you're kind of like rewarding yourself, and then you won't be able to like think, oh, like when you're actually like at the event or at the party or something like that, it's like it's not in the back of my head. It's like, ooh, I have to do that. Like, so just knowing that and kind of setting up my day to like prepare for it has helped me a lot.
Let's link up with Krista on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hey, Fix listeners, welcome to episode 67 of the Fix podcast. I'm your host, Krista Huber, and we're finishing out the month of March, which means our last official episode in celebration of Women's History Month. Like I said at the top of the month, it's not like we really needed a month to dedicate to this because I am very lucky to consistently have some female powerhouses on the show, but I couldn't think of a more amazing guest to wrap up this series because she is one of my youngest interviewees I've had on the podcast, and her name is Ria. And Ria is the founder of a really cool, fun, new, exciting activewear company called Bolt. And I love this conversation because Ria is only 19. She decided not even 2 semesters into her first year of college that it wasn't for her, and she wanted to come up with an alternative plan. And what I just found so interesting about this conversation, I actually say it towards the end of the episode, is the fact that a lot of her inspiration to go off and do her own thing at her age came from social media, specifically from TikTok. And as she was describing it, I just kind of paused for a second, and this is probably showing the difference in her being a part of Gen Z and me classifying myself as millennial. But I was just like, wait, you're really attributing your entire career and the decisions you've made over the course of the past year or so to something you've seen on TikTok. And that's just like mind blowing to really, really think about the power of social media. And more importantly, she even talks about how she's been able to collaborate and network and understand the importance of doing those things when a lot of the path that she's chosen can be more of a solo venture. We talk about the perception of entrepreneurships to people who are younger, the ideas of kind of being sold on the romantic side of it when it's actually a lot of work and it's not meant for everybody. And I just really loved her perspective for somebody so young. And I even said to her that I wish I had had a lot of this perspective. And I'm really happy that she took it upon herself to get out and start her own thing, but then take it a step further by really wanting to spread her message. I complimented her right at the beginning of the show, and I want to say it again here in this introduction. She reached out to me multiple times to set up this interview as just somebody who has listened to the podcast, which I, of course, appreciate, but I have so much admiration and respect for somebody going after what they want. And I think that'll really shine through throughout this conversation. I was just honestly blown away by her perspective and maturity. And I know that she's only just getting started on her journey, and she's got some really, really big things ahead of her. So if I have even a little bit of an opportunity to help her spread her message and get her brand out there, I'm really grateful to be able to use this show and this specific episode to do that. So that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, I think in creating the series for the month and trying to put a theme around these episodes, I'm again honored to be able to surround myself, connect with such incredible women. So with that, let's jump into our latest episode with Ria. Ria, welcome to the Fix podcast. I am so excited and honored to have you today. And we're going to kick it off with the signature Fix question, which is our coffee question. So you gave me a little hint that you're a big coffee drinker. I want to know all the details. What do you like to sip on in the morning? What's your go-to coffee of choice?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on. So yeah, I'm a big coffee person every day. It's like I'll get it cranky if I don't have my morning coffee. So I get a cold brew with oat milk, and as a gym girl, I have to get my sugar-free syrups.
Nice.
And so that's usually my go-to.
Do you usually make your coffee at home or do you have like a go-to place? I know you're based out of Vegas. So do you have a go-to place that you go to that's near your house?
No, so I have like some coffee, like the Starbucks ones that they
Yep.
sell at like Albertsons or whatnot, and then I usually like make that at home. But on days where I'm just like kind of want to treat myself,
Yeah.
I'll go to Starbucks. How about you?
Nice. I used to be a big Starbucks girl, but I am very loyal to my local places. So I'm like a huge iced almond milk latte girl. But if I am going to Starbucks, since we're on the Starbucks topic, I'm big on my sugar-free syrups too. I go for like, that's what I need, my like real caffeine boost, and I'll order an iced triple in a venti cup. So this is my little hack. You ready? So it's an iced triple. You put it in a venti cup. You get extra ice,
Mhm.
and then it kind of dilutes it a little bit. And then I get extra almond milk, and then I'll add a couple pumps of sugar-free vanilla. It's way less calories than anything else you're going to order that's going to be that big, but it's still got a lot of caffeine.
It's
When
like
I say,
tricking yourself that like wow,
yeah,
like a venti, like it's
exactly.
barely
It's
in.
kind of like this little like, it's I call it like my little Starbucks hack. So for a while, when I first got into group fitness and like we were talking about before we hit the record button, and I was saying how I would wake up a couple days a week, like super early to teach a 5 a.m. class. That became like my
Really
go-to drink to the
exhausted.
point where all of my clients knew what it was, and they would bring it to me sometimes, or like they would constantly message me on Instagram and be like, "What's that coffee order you posted again?" It became like this running thing. It was kind of cool.
Okay, for
So,
sure. I'll have to try
yeah.
that. I think I'm gonna have to go with an oat milk instead though, because if
I
I go
do like
with
oat
almond,
milk.
I would die.
Do you prefer, are you allergic to almonds?
Yeah, I'm allergic.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, then definitely swap out the
I'll try.
almond milk part.
I'll try out my
Sure.
substitution. And
Cool. Yeah, let me know how it is. I like oat milk. Oat milk's definitely having a moment these
let you
days.
know. Yeah.
Well, we could talk about coffee for forever, but that's obviously not what you came on the show to talk about. And I'm really excited to talk about your line, what you're doing, your goals and visions. And I first just want to acknowledge the fact that, and just kind of set the stage for the Fix listeners. You are probably one of the youngest guests I've had on my show. And I really respect the fact that you reached out to me saying, "Hey, I listened to your show and I would love the opportunity to come on." So I want to shout you out for that, because I think that just says so much about who you are as a person, and the fact that you really care about the work that you're doing and the concept that you're creating. And I'm just really excited to be able to provide the platform for you to talk about it. So that's number one. I give you a lot of kudos for that. And number two, I know a whole lot about you, but now I want to bring the Fix listeners into this and answer the question: who is Ria? But more specifically, why should we care about what you are going to cover in this conversation? Get
Yeah.
into the stuff.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That was really sweet.
Of
Yeah,
course.
so I'm Ria. I'm 19. I'm based out of Las Vegas. I am a Gen Z entrepreneur in the fitness space. And that's kind of why we connected, because of our deep passions for fitness, obviously.
Hmm.
And I feel like because I'm a Gen Z, like woman of color entrepreneur, I see the world in a different light compared to older entrepreneurs or Gen Z my age that aren't in that space and still trying to figure themselves out and still in college and like unsure what the future holds for them. And so since I'm pretty set on, obviously things change. But since I'm pretty set right now for my short-term goals and like what I want career wise, I think I have a different perspective compared to a lot of people that I know and speak to.
I absolutely love that. And there's a whole lot to unpack there. And, before we talk about bolts and everything, I want to talk about just your decision of how you arrived at realizing that, hey, maybe college wasn't the route for you, especially just to kind of keep it timely, right? There's a lot of people who, because of COVID, and I think you had this exact experience, correct me if I'm wrong, they started school, and or maybe they chose not to go right away because their first year of college would have been completely online, and that wasn't exactly the experience that they were signing up for. So I think that you just kind of walking us through your experience with that in the last 2 years might help somebody listening who is around your age and thinking like, is this the right path for me?
Yeah, so I started university right when like it was their first semester ever dealing with the craziness that like was COVID. It was so new to everyone. And so at that time it was normalized for basically every freshman, every student to go to class online, but pay like the university tuition. I just had friends that literally like moved out here, lived in the dorms, but they weren't going to in-person classes due to COVID. And so it was definitely an interesting first semester. I wonder how things would have turned out if COVID didn't exist. But for me, I ended up going to a local university, and it's UNLV. I went for psychology just because I thought it was something interesting and something that I might, want to pursue in the future, but wasn't super tied down to that. And after, a couple of classes, I realized that I was kind of zoning out and kind of slacking out on my classes. And I realized that if I don't have that drive, then I can't do this for like the next 4 years, obviously. I kind of stepped back and said, okay, I need to come up with a different plan, because obviously if I drop out, I don't want to be not pursuing anything. And so I looked up, like ways that you could make money, like a solid amount without having that degree. And then I got into like all different sorts of stuff. And then I kind of came to the conclusion that I want to be like a social media marketer due to like how volatile like that market is right now. And like it's something that I can hop on. And so after doing that for a couple months for some businesses, doing their social media marketing and providing those services, I wanted something of my own and kind of applying those skills over to something that I control and something that I created. And so being in the fitness space for a couple of years, I was really passionate about it and wanted to kind of implement that with my entrepreneurial mindset. Started thinking, and then with my experience being a young woman in fitness, a light bulb like kind of clicked, and I realized that there was a gender gap in fitness where most of the weightlifting spaces were catered towards men, and it was like more of a masculine vibe, where women's fitness is more marketed towards like yoga and Pilates and that sort of stuff. And so noticing that gap, I kind of wanted a way to make women feel more confident and more functional and feel like a badass, honestly, at the gym, and like feel like they're powerful enough to lift, because we are. So this is kind of my way of bridging that gap.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into there is more I want to go.
Yeah.
In talking about like your experience being a social media manager and doing other people, like really repping other people's brands and working in there behind the scenes. But I do want you to tell us a little bit more about Bolt specifically and kind of tie that into your own fitness journey, because it sounds like from the conversation we have had that a lot of this like R&D that you kind of did came out of your own experience of being in the gym and figuring out what was functional for you to wear as somebody who really found a lot of confidence and happiness in weightlifting.
Yeah, for sure. So when I first started lifting, it was just kind of like, a random shirt and then like, I don't know, some sweats, honestly. But once I started like getting more comfortable with myself, I realized that a good, like cute gym fit is really what makes me feel confident and like I'm allowed to be in the gym, which we all are. But the gym fit like really changed the game for me and kind of inspired me to like be confident with myself and know that I'm supposed to be there and know that I'm allowed to be there. So I created my most recent collection was like hoodies and like sweat shorts, so they can be worn in and outside of the gym. But if you go to the gym in them, they're like super comfortable and you can like do all sorts of like lifts in them. And then the branding itself is a lightning bolt, and it's targeted towards, hey, you can be a lightning bolt because this is like you reclaiming your energy and you reclaiming your power and all that stuff. Because lightning bolts, when I came up with a name, they're exactly what I want my audience to feel like unapologetic, loud, energetic, badass, all of that stuff. And so that's kind of how I created the symbolism in my new collection, which is like lightning bolt themed.
I love that. That's awesome. I actually don't think when we first spoke, I had a chance to ask you about the origin story behind the name and everything and its meaning. So I think that's amazing. And I also, I want to kind of go a little further on what you just said about feeling allowed to be in the gym, right? Because, so often, I personally, in my experience of working with a lot of women who really love group fitness, I find that if I try to push them to transition to the weight room, if we're all being really honest with ourselves, so much of the apprehension just comes from this idea that they don't know what to do. And it's really in their head, because if they've taken enough group fitness classes, they actually do know a few things and they've learned a lot of different movement patterns. Maybe they don't know the most optimized way to put them together, which is the whole point of a coach, right? But I think that sense of belonging, and even your word choice is interesting to say you didn't feel like you were allowed there. So can you kind of talk to me about, like, in your experience, what has made you maybe personally feel that way? Or what other influences do you think have contributed to a lot of women feeling like that?
Yeah, I think, well, for me personally, there was a women's only section of my gym, and it was just like a small portion where there were a few select machines, and it's
And
like,
like no weights, right? No
yeah,
barbells. Yeah.
yeah,
I've been in that in a world like that too.
it was pretty small, and there was machines there that not there that I wanted to use, and so kind
Mhm.
of to like leave my comfort zone and step out into the co-ed space. And then the gym that I used to go to, there was also a separate section for like squat racks, deadlift platforms, cable machines, all that stuff.
Sure.
And just the way that that was kind of, the environment was very off-putting, and even just walking in there, I kind of felt off and like not like I was supposed to not be there. But for me, it was a mental cue, and it was honestly just like, I pay the same amount as everyone else in this gym. I can use the equipment that they're using, and I have the exact same right as they do. And so kind of remembering that kind of gave me the confidence to kind of make use of what I wanted out of a workout at the gym. And I think the kind of discrepancy between how women's fitness is marketed and men's fitness is marketed is rooted in societal like culture as a whole. Because when women start, lifting weights, there's, I'm sure you've heard like the common "I don't want to get bulky" stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Hear it all the time.
it's terrible. But at the same time, when I was thinking about that, women don't want to get bulky, they just don't want to look like a man. But because of how we've been raised and like how society is teaching us, they're teaching us that being strong is a manly and masculine trait, which it's, obviously not. So like by default, they think, oh, okay, if I lift, I'm gonna get strong. But in their, from being,
Subconsciously.
yeah, subconsciously, like we're being told that strong equals like masculine. So that kind of like takes away from their sense of femininity, which it's not true at all. For anyone who's like starting to get in the like lifting space, it's not true at all.
Yeah, you're so right. I never actually really thought about it like that before,
Yeah.
because, I have, just in being in the fitness space for as long as I have the mindset of like strong, like I want to associate being strong with being female. But
Right.
it's so true. Like it really makes perfect sense. And I hate when I hear people say, like, I don't want to get bulky, because we could have a whole conversation and a whole episode about how the other thing they're describing has a lot to do with their diet and the way that they're eating, right?
Right.
And all of this fits together. But at the same time, you then hear someone saying, like, they want to get toned, right? Like that's the word that women choose to use instead. And yet you need to do the same thing. Like the definition that a lot of people have, or I should say the picture instead of definition, that a lot of people have in their head of what toned really looks like, right? If you really figured out what some of those, let's say like Instagram models or like whatever inspiration you're looking to, a lot of them are lifting weights and they're focusing on resistance training. And so it's just like really, it's the importance of having conversations like this one where we can kind of change that narrative, right? And I think that really speaks to why you've decided to start your clothing line too.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's difficult because when you're a beginner, you don't know any better. And so it's just
Mhm.
like, oh, the whole, Instagram post where someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about is like, train this way to get toned. And it's
Yeah.
like, what does that even mean?
Right, exactly. So, you yourself having been a beginner, right? And I know that you shared with me that for you, you went into the gym with the intention too of wanting to get stronger because you felt like that you were that person that was always quote unquote too skinny, right?
Yeah.
And that was that was what you wanted to overcome and you wanted to personally accomplish, and finding that strength through weightlifting. I'd love to know, as someone who can relate to a beginner, because we all started somewhere, What were some of those inspirations that you used to get yourself going and get yourself started and feel like you could go in to the gym with more of a plan and ultimately now the confidence that you've grown to have today?
Yeah, so for the first couple of years when I didn't know like anything to do with like training and especially the side of like weight training, I saw this girl on my Instagram and her name was Nastasia Ponomarenko. I saw her like weight gain journey, and it was, a similar body type, and then, a couple of years later, how she built the body that she has now. And I
Mhm.
definitely wanted the same, like a similar physique to hers. And I know now that that's kind of impossible to reach the exact same body as someone else due to genetics and other factors and whatnot. But I did see that, and I realized it was possible for me because I was like, hey, she has the same body type that I have, but she changed it completely just by like changing her diet and training a certain way. And I knew that if I want to gain weight, I would have to eat more, but I would also have to start training if I wanted the weight to like be muscle and not
Sure.
just fat.
Of
So that
course.
she was my biggest inspiration because at the time she was a YouTuber. And so, just watching the YouTube videos and seeing like the movements and had like a general plan on what to do before I went to the gym helps a lot, because then you're just not like walking around looking lost, which in itself makes you feel out of place.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
there's totally a complex that I've definitely had this conversation with maybe some other people on my show, but
Mhm.
it's definitely been a while since it's come up. And I think we all have this complex that we think that all the eyes are on us, but half the time everyone else is just concerned about their own workout. And it's really
Exactly.
easy to sit here and say that. So I want to acknowledge that first and foremost. Like it's so easy to sit here and say that. I think it's even important to say like personally, if I were like traveling or something like that and I go into a new gym
Mhm.
that's not my usual environment, even when I know exactly what to do and I like have my program in a spreadsheet, like I've got the whole workout ready to rock, I still get that feeling, right? And I would consider myself pretty well versed in my fitness and just my knowledge and expertise, but it's just like that change of like, well, I don't know these people here. I don't know like what that gym's culture is and like how they work in. Like there are a lot of things to think about. And I want to kind of tie that back to something you said initially just about your gym outfits and like how that was one of the things that helped you kind of like have a different sense of confidence for the gym. So, first and foremost, what were those like initial outfits that you found, like maybe certain brands or anything that maybe are now your inspiration for your own line?
Yeah, so I definitely kind of ventured into, the big ones like Gymshark and all that
Yeah.
stuff, not knowing that much about the fitness apparel space. And then after, playing around with like the bigger ones like Gymshark and navigation, all that stuff, I still love that sort of stuff. But my brand is more towards like the dark sport and Anaka power, more like functional, like streetwear style of fitness
Okay.
apparel.
More of
And
that
I
athleisure
love
vibe.
how that looks. Yeah.
And what was your, do you like, what has been your thoughts or like, I guess maybe strategy behind that?
Could you reword the question?
Sure. Like what when it comes to what you just said about more of that streetwear vibe, what kind of inspired that versus say what your personal preferences were right out of the gate with like the gym sharks of the world and stuff?
Yeah.
Because that they're totally different.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 100%. I actually started off doing like matching sets of like
Okay.
sports bra and then the shorts. I did get like some sales from that, but I didn't really like get results that I wanted out of that. And then I kind of, my whole thing is like growth over comfort and like leaving your comfort zone and choosing your personal growth over that. And so I just put like growth over comfort on a hoodie using Printful, and then like the back had like a butterfly on it because a butterfly symbolizes growth. And
Yeah.
so it was just something really simple that I made, in a couple of days. And then I slapped that on a hoodie, and then I started putting those on my site. And I was like, why not? It's a shipping kind of business model. So I didn't really have much to lose. And it was starting to get cold out. So it's like, let's just see how this does. And then I actually got a lot of sales from that. And I was pretty surprised because I thought, more people would be more on the sets, and because that's like obviously what's trending. But due to my audience and due to my branding, from testing that out, I realized that that's kind of what my audience wants, and that's kind of what fits my brand better, is more of like the like oversized tees and like the hoodies and sweats and all of that stuff, which is honestly I'm obsessed with. And I think it's new and people like because it's new and like it's not overdone.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how something that you probably thought was like a really basic design from what you're describing versus maybe something else that you really slaved over and thought about a lot? It
Yeah.
always seems to be the story that like that stuff that you weren't so sure about or you didn't necessarily put as much thought into it, just kind of came to you and then you went with it. Those seem to be the things that like really change your perspective or like take off for somebody's career.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes, which is really funny. But it's a learning lesson for sure because in business, like this is a huge mistake that a lot of business owners make. And I'm glad that I learned it early on, is just guessing what the market wants rather than like knowing and having actual data or asking them directly, even like, hey, is this something that you would buy?
Yeah, so talk to us about how you do a lot of your own market research. You know, you mentioned like in just describing that one story about the hoodies, you
Mhm.
talked about like realizing that that's what your audience wanted. So this is kind of like three questions in one, but let's just like set the stage for who is the Bolt audience? How are people finding you? Is it mostly through social? And, you know, how do you continue to kind of like figure out who the person or the client avatar is that you want to market this brand to?
Right. So I obviously, from, my whole spiel about like the gender gap in fitness, it was young women and like from anywhere from like beginners to like more advanced lifters. But I may or may not in the future, I'm kind of shifting towards less of the gender gap and more of the just like leaving your comfort zone as a whole, because that's obviously an issue that everyone everyone goes through. And so I've had like a few men like tell me like, hey, what are you dropping like designs for men and
Yeah,
stuff?
they want the guys stuff. The
Yeah,
demand is there.
yeah, I'm sorry, like
Awesome.
thinking about like kind of like transferring, and obviously things change and like the vision evolves, so that might be something that happens in the future. And then what were your other two questions?
How are you interacting with your audience to be able to get some of this feedback versus your point of, you know, not just like randomly testing things?
Yeah, for sure. So I've created, like, from being a content creator, I kind of built up an audience of a lot of people who are like warm prospects for
Sure.
my brand. And then because I created like that audience, I'll just go in and like take a picture of a sample, or like, maybe how do you feel about this trend? And then it's a simple poll, and like a lot of people will even like slide up on my DM and like let me know way more than I would have ever thought to ask for. So that's really great because like literally just directly asking for feedback from my audience, because I have like that platform.
Mhm.
I've kind of taken advantage of it.
That's awesome. And I also want to talk about drop shipping too,
Mhm.
because I know we just mentioned it briefly and I think it's a really interesting concept for the sake of somebody who wants to get started with something without that huge upfront investment of inventory. So could you describe that to us and just kind of give us the overview of how it works?
Yeah, so drop shipping is this new, well, I wouldn't say new, but it's very trendy
It's
now.
very hot right now, I
Yeah,
feel
for
like. I feel
sure.
like I just hear about it all the time.
Mhm. It's a business model. So basically, you're the middleman who just directs sales to your website. However, you never hold inventory, because once someone gets a sale from your website, you just order it from the place that you're getting it from, and they ship it directly to your customer and it never comes to you. So that's really appealing to people now because there's not that many, there's not much overhead when it comes to that. You don't have to buy inventory in bulk for that kind of business model.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of why I was like, I have nothing to lose if I like slap this design on, like, I created this design and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. Let's see how the audience, and how my market reacts to it. If it turns out like they don't like it, then okay, you just wasted, a design. That's fine. You can fix it up and make it better. But if they do like it, then you're just profiting from whatever the margin is from you got buying it from like your manufacturer, and then however much it is that they bought it for.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, this might be a tough question to answer, but do you think if that really wasn't a business model or a concept that has gained traction, how much more difficult do you think it would have been for you to even come up with the entire concept for Bolt? Because if we take this all the way back to you describing how you got into this and just starting to realize you wanted to do something for yourself, you wanted it to be about fitness, but you also wanted to be realistic and recognize that, hey, you were choosing not to go to college. You wanted to come up with an alternate path that you had a lot of possibilities and opportunities from to be able to make a living.
Yeah. I think that I would have definitely maybe not be where I am today, just because with so many people like in the make money online space, and you kind of see it everywhere you go, and people are just like promoting side hustles, and like entrepreneurship is like so like promoted even, or even
Mhm.
romanticized in like Gen Z culture. I definitely wouldn't have like considered it as an option as much as I did if that wasn't, you know, so prominent.
Now let's break that down, what you just said about romanticizing entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
because this shit's really fucking hard, right? Like there is no other
Yeah.
way to describe it. And I have, certain podcasters that I listen to that don't sugarcoat it and they talk about like recognizing that. And I don't think it's talked about enough because I think there's too many people out there that are selling the idea of working for yourself, or it's kind of like made fun of a little bit. And like I can think of that Instagram reel. There was a trend for a little bit. I don't remember what the exact sound was that went with it, but it was something like, I quit my 9 to 5 so that I could work 24/7. And it's become like a little bit of a joke, but it
Yeah.
really is true. So I want your perspective on that as a 19-year-old Gen Z, like from your perspective and your life experience at your current age and everything that you have, like from culturally where you live in the US, like all these factors, right? Like when you think about this idea of entrepreneurship being romanticized, how does that make you feel now having trying to do it?
Yeah, I definitely, before I kind of like hopped into the space, I kind of felt the same way. It's like, oh, that's like so great. You get to like vacation, like work from your laptop wherever you want. And you know, you're making like a lot of money, all that stuff, which is a part of it. And obviously there's some perks to it, which I really do enjoy, like being able to work remotely. But people aren't really talking about the full picture, and they're just kind of like posting like their highlight, excuse me, reels of like the money and like the nice cars and just like the time freedom and all that stuff. And again, I do appreciate that part of my career, but the other side of it is, you know, like trying to solve problems with like no past experience, managing a team, time management, getting yourself to do work when you don't want to, because even if I was working like a traditional, if I wasn't self-employed, even if I didn't want to go to work, I would still show up because I didn't want to
Mhm.
be fired. But here it's a little bit of a different situation
Yeah, no
because
one's firing you.
my bed is literally right there. So it's like, it's very much, it's half like mindset and it's like half like physical, like business skills. So that's kind of my take on it. And I do agree with you that a lot of people are trying to like sell the idea of entrepreneurship and like that kind of dream, because they're like, there's a motive behind it, that like selling a course or like selling like one-on-one coaching where like they kind of like mentor you to become an entrepreneur. And so they kind of want you to only see the good side of it.
So in your case, who or what content specifically inspires you to be able to kind of wade through some of that BS?
Yeah, so when I first started, honestly, it was like even before I started full with the social media marketing. And then I ran across these girls on TikTok, and like I saw, ironically, like I saw their lifestyle, and I kind of was like blinded by it, and like saw everything with like rose-colored glasses, where I was just like, I kind of want that. And so that's kind of what inspired me, because it resonates with you a little bit differently when you see two young girls doing it rather than some like random guy that I really don't really relate to, because I'm not some random young guy. So seeing like two girls like do this successfully kind of triggered something in my brain that like was like, if they can do it, I can too.
Now, I'm curious, were they also in the fashion, any kind of like apparel space? Were they in the fitness space? Like what outside like you just said, like some of it you realized you were looking at it with rose-colored glasses from them kind of sharing the cool parts about all of it. But what about their experience really resonated with you? I'm just curious like what some of those parallels were.
Yeah, they really like again, like they were really persistent on like hitting your pain points. It's like, who wants to like work like this, or like, I, off the top of my head, like I'm struggling to like say anything without offending like corporate workers, because I know it's like not for everyone.
Not for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
But they hit like some of my specific pain points, like about like working in a corporate job, or you know, not living up to your potential, or like not living up to your dreams or stuff like that. And so that kind of hit a certain pain point for me, and that's kind of what resonated with me. And they weren't really in the fitness apparel niche, but I did know like a few like founders that were in the fitness apparel niche, and so that kind of again clicked with me, and it was like, they're doing it, why can't I?
And in just kind of talking through that, first of all, I think it's so interesting. Like, this is going to become a more common thing for people to say. It's so interesting that something from TikTok inspired your career decisions. Like to think even back like 2 years ago, because TikTok has really just exploded, we would not be sitting here having had that conversation. Like, yeah, TikTok was around, but I think like nobody knew what it was. The only person that was obsessed with it and just telling people like, I'm betting on TikTok was Gary Vee. And he was obviously right. But it's like really fascinating to me. I just kind of want to like acknowledge what you just said, like that you were inspired by something on TikTok, and look, and it wasn't like you were inspired just to go buy something or, you know, interact with a certain brand or whatever. Like it actually influenced how you're choosing to want to live your life, which is just the power of social media. Like that in and of itself, it's kind of mind blowing how quickly all of that technology has gotten us to where we are right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I don't even know if I would be in the fitness space. And even if I were in the fitness space without social media, I would not know as much as I do now.
Yeah. And I mean, let's talk about that from like the positive side, right? Because we were talking about it a little bit from the negative of just like how people can only show you what they want to show you. But I'd love to know how your experience in being a social media content manager and a content creator, talk me through like what that looked like for you and what you learned from that, to the point where you then realize like, hey, I'm not sure that this is for me. Like I want to rep my own brand. Like what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I was doing social media management for, we're in April now, kind of. So a little over a year.
Okay.
And so it honestly benefited me a lot, because getting to, you know, kind of think of it as an internship where I'm behind the scenes on their marketing, and like doing everything digital marketing, from like email to content creation to social media management, and understanding kind of how those wheels turn for a business that wasn't mine. It was allowed me to like experiment and play around with things and make mistakes, but I was able to learn from those mistakes that kind of transferred over into my brand. So that way I had those marketing knowledge under my belt. And then a couple of months doing social media management, I realized that I wanted to start like a fitness page. So become like a fitness content creator. Being a content creator is like very different from being a social media manager. Because when it comes down to like doing social media management for brands or businesses, it really just comes down to like conversions. So like how many sales you can get, or how many like app downloads you can get, or like how many people you can get through the door. But when it comes to content creation, like being an influencer, quote unquote, you're more focused on like resonating with people and getting to a point where they identify with your personal brand. And so I was kind of doing that for a couple months. I decided to step away from being a fitness content creator just for like mental health reasons, wanting to maintain this kind of personal brand look, which was turned into a separate thing from who I was as a person. So that's kind of been my experience in the social media space.
Let's talk about further what you just said about, you know, the difference between being more of like a social media manager versus an influencer and finding that audience to resonate with you. Because I think one of the hardest parts about the latter, because I personally get to do a little bit of both in the jobs that I have, like in having the podcast, obviously I'm looking for people to resonate with me. And from a personal standpoint, I fall into that second category. But with the other position that I have at an athletic club where I'm managing their content, I am very much trying to get people in the door, you know, those conversions, all those things are measurable. So I too get to kind of like see both sides of the coin.
Right.
And I want to know your opinion on the second part of it and being an influencer and trying to get people to resonate with your brand. How challenging do you feel that it is, that it can be difficult to measure a lot of that stuff outside of the vanity metrics?
Like 99% difficult.
It's so hard,
Because
right?
a lot of people are just following you because they want like you to follow them. So it's like you don't even know if they get value out of your content or it's all just a numbers game to them. And so that's kind of what it came down to. Like when I stepped away from content creation, like and taking it seriously and just
Mhm.
started posting my life and just being like more myself and like not being pressured to like, oh, I have to post a reel today for the views and for the followers and all that stuff. Like I lost so many followers.
Now, what did you feel like? What was it really just that, what you just said about like feeling the pressure of having to like, that I have to do this today and like I have to like hack the algorithm and that sort of thing? Like, was that what made you feel probably some burnout from trying to do it and keep it up? Or did you feel like you were also simultaneously trying to fit the content to what you thought would do well, and maybe that wasn't who you are as a person?
Definitely more of the second, because
Okay.
when I would post like stuff that did really well, even though like it kind of doesn't fit who I am as a person anymore, then like I'm just like regurgitating like what did well just because it did well in the past, but that's not who I am anymore. Like
Hmm.
I have different interests and I'm a different person than who I was in the past. And so like seeing that engagement go down, like seeing you lose followers kind of like it's a toll. It's like, but this is who I am. Like do people not like that? So it's kind of like a mental battle.
Yeah, and I mean, so in feeling that way, and first of all, I think everything you just said is super honest, and I feel like a lot of people might not come out and say that, but they're probably thinking it internally. And I
Um,
appreciate you being really candid about it, because I think this is an interesting thought to have. Like, how did you then decide to walk away from doing that? Like, was the timing right? And that's where like the idea for Bolt kind of came in. Like, what did that whole transition then look like for you? We're kind of walking through the journey of like, okay, we were in the social media management space doing it for other brands. Now you wanted to find your own voice, but then all of a sudden your own voice wasn't actually your own voice. So where did the jump then come in for Bolt? Was it then?
Yeah, so with doing social media management for a couple of months, I started like coming up with the idea like, oh, I wanted something of my own. And then I was like, but maybe I should like save up more so that way like I'm prepared to take the jump. But I was like, you know what? I have savings, like let's just make the jump now. And so that was kind of something that I did. I don't want to say spontaneously, but it would be more like realistic, quote unquote, for me to wait for it. But I knew if I waited, then it would never get done. So that's when Bolt started. And then I was a content creator for however many months up until like a couple of months ago. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was still doing like fitness content creation, social media management, freelancing on the side, and then also running Bold. And then coincidentally, me and my family like went to California, and then we were staying in a cabin up in Big Sur. There was like no service there. And so I wasn't able to like make content and post content or like even post on my store or even check my DMs. I was like, well, I guess we're just gonna do a social media break. I probably need it anyway. And then I ended up coming home, obviously, to Wi-Fi and all that stuff. And I was like, that week was so peaceful and so relaxing. I think I'm just gonna stay on this break for as long as I please. And then I honestly didn't really know if I wanted to go back. So that's kind of where that kind of transition of events happened.
That's really interesting. It was like a forced break,
Yeah.
but it made you realize like it gave you the time to actually step back and like really examine everything, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I feel like when I got back from my break, I was like telling everyone, I was like, if you struggle with this, like I recommend a break so much because it'll just help you realize like, is this something that I want to do? Even a break
Hmm.
from anything, it doesn't have to be social media or like could be what you're passionate about, or like maybe you're an artist of some sort and you feel like burnt out and you just don't have that same passion for it anymore. Taking a break will either A, remind you how much you miss it, or B, remind you how much you hate it.
It's so, so true. And
Yeah.
I love that you have had that. I love that you've had that experience, because I wish that I had that experience when I was 19. And I wish I gave myself permission to recognize that. Right. But at the time, I think, and I want to use this to talk about like where you are relative to your friends too.
Mhm.
Because I think at the time, like personally, you know, the world, like we said, with tech and social media and everything, the world has changed a lot since I went to college, and it really wasn't that long ago. So it's crazy when you think
Yeah,
about
it's
it.
been
But
crazy.
yeah, but at the same time, I don't think I could have given myself permission to like pump the brakes on anything that I was doing in school, because
Right.
it was such an environment that was like competitive, and it was like, well, you need to do this because you have to get this internship. And if you don't get this internship, then you're not going to graduate and make this certain amount of money out of college. And it's just like, I could go on and on and on.
Pretty stressful, yeah, because
Right.
everyone around you is like grinding. So it's like I have to too.
So I would love to know, you know, outside of the forced break that you just described, like who else in your life and like what other influences do you have that has made you realize a lot of what you're describing?
Yeah, so obviously I don't really go that many places besides the gym. Like that allows me to be very selective with who I surround myself with, because it's like not going to work technically and I'm not going to school technically. So it's like the people in my social setting and like my social life is very selective because of my lifestyle. And so I'm really blessed to like have the friends that I do have. And then also it's great because the friends that I do have, they're not all entrepreneurs, so they kind of like see things in a different light, or like a consumer light that I don't understand, because that's just not how my brain is wired.
Sure.
And from networking, I use Bumble Biz, so that kind of is location based as well. And I joined a group of like 20 somethings. I'm the youngest in the group, but it's still like a bunch of young entrepreneurs, and we just like kind of hang out and meet each other, and it's really fun. And I love surrounding myself with those types of people because A, they get it, and B, I just feel inspired to like do more and be more when I'm with those types of people.
Tell me more about your experience with Bumble Biz. I'm so curious, even personally, because somebody told me recently that they were a content creator or some kind of social media manager, something, maybe
Yeah.
even like in the design space, and their business has like exploded thanks to Bumble Biz.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know like who, you know, what kind of tipped you off to get involved in that, and what has it been like for you? It sounds like it's been great.
Yeah, so what got me into like joining the app is I had the opportunity to join a mentorship, and my friend was actually in it. So I asked her like, because there's so many like, I don't want to say scams, but things that in the business space where it's like you pay for a course and then you just don't really get that ROI
Right.
on.
Yeah. It's like exactly what we were talking about earlier, and like selling the idea of being an
Exactly.
entrepreneur.
But my friend was in this mentorship and I asked her about it. She's like, so much value. It's great. You should join all of this stuff. I had the opportunity to join, but it was a little outside of my budget. And so I knew that even if I couldn't afford a mentor, I should still surround myself with like-minded people and other entrepreneurs and kind of have a collaborative mindset going into this moving on. And so I got the app, and funnily enough, one of the guys that I ended up matching with, I spoke to him like on the phone. I kind of like gave him my whole spiel on like what I am, who I do, all that stuff. Because like my buddy actually like is a clothing manufacturer, and he like makes clothes and he designs clothes and all that stuff. Like, I'll give you that introduction. I was like, awesome, that's great. He actually like helped me with my most recent collection. So
That's
shout out
amazing.
if you're listening to this. Yeah. And then also opened up like my my introduction to the group that I am in now, where we just like meet bi-weekly and just like kind of hang out. And then it's slowly like growing to this huge thing where their friends will invite their friends, and like we're all just a bunch of people with different visions, different goals, and we can all help each other.
Now, outside of obviously that amazing benefit of that connection, because that has literally helped you fuel your business and get
Yeah.
your product out there and everything,
Yeah.
what are some other benefits that you've gotten out of being a part of that group? Maybe in terms of some of the topics that you discuss, like on during your meetings. Is there anything that really stands out? Like, if you could impart some of the advice that you've gotten from having those conversations onto our listeners.
I think the benefit is more conceptual,
Mhm.
because going into it, like I didn't get like actual advice that I've implemented so far, because obviously like we all don't really understand each other's like projects to the extent
Sure,
that,
because they're different. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
totally.
But it has helped me like realize the importance of collaborative like marketing, like even just like being open-minded. I think that's kind of something that I learned more recently, because going into like the past year, I kind of just want to do everything by myself, which is like, that is what it is, but at the same time you have to be more open-minded to like feedback and advice. So I think it's more conceptual, the benefits that I've gotten out of that group. But I'm still very like grateful that I can like bounce ideas off of someone and hear second opinions.
Now, how do you manage your day to day? Just in what you just said about like trying to do all of this on your own. And a lot of times, a lot of this work can be a pretty lonely venture. Like, I just had this conversation with someone the other day, in even thinking about podcasting. For as much as I interview other people, like, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that if you don't know other podcasters, they don't get it. Like, they just see the finished product.
And like that's with anything. It's just like
Yeah.
I can't even conceptualize like what you would have to do. It's like the problems or like the steps that it takes to get like the finished episode. Like
Yeah, and I
I
would
can't
say the
even
same
imagine.
thing about a hoodie, right? Like, I'd be like, "Oh god," because all I do is just go buy them. Like, I'm not
Yeah,
thinking about what's going into them getting made, you know?
exactly. So my day to day, I start off my morning every day in the gym. That's how I love starting my mornings, and so I'm there for pretty long. I'll like say like 2 hours at least. But since I've gotten more busy, it's kind of been cutting short. So whenever I'm done with the gym, I'll get home, usually starving. So I'll go home, eat, like shower, and then I'll honestly just like chill out for a little bit for like an hour, and kind of just like reset my brain, like do what needs to be done, and then hop on my computer, do whatever needs to be done for clients. I usually like getting that done out of the way. So that'll be like, I don't know, emails, that'll be posting, that'll be batching content, whatever the case may be. Once that's done, whatever needs to be done for my business. And then I kind of come to a point around like 8 or 9 where I mentally tap out. And it's like, if I continue, the work won't be quality anymore. So that's,
Mhm.
I just like time to chill out. Then for the rest of the night, I take it easy and like hang out with my family or like watch a TV show or something like that.
The fact that you pointed out your chill time, I think that's so important to highlight,
Yeah.
because I think it can be really easy for people to assume that the way you get it all done is to just constantly be go, go, go. But I'd love to know your take on the importance of having that downtime, because there's actually a lot of research around this. Like, some of your best creativity comes out of being technically bored. Like, if you don't have that space, you can't be creative because your brain is just like constantly thinking about all the different boxes you have to check.
Right. Because of hustle culture, like I definitely used to be more of like the go, go, go type of worker,
Mhm.
where every second I'll use to like be productive or like be doing something. And so I realized like that was not sustainable. And my friend even pointed out, like it just kind of didn't seem obvious to me at the time. When you're working like that, your work isn't going to be as good just because of like how you're gonna burn out eventually. It's not sustainable. And so like you definitely need your rest. And I know that like people are like starting to highlight it more and more, and how rest and recovery is like more important. Like a lot of people are starting to talk about it, which is good. So it's more of like the work-life balance that I have going on.
So was it something for you where like you started to notice it and you quickly made the change, or like do you still fight it a little bit from time to time? It seems like you have like a good understanding of like what work times work best for you.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, I feel like now, which is ironic because a year ago it was completely opposite. But I feel like now I struggle more with like getting myself to work when I obviously just want to relax. And it's just like, because I'm like in the stage where it's like I'm never gonna like be 19 years old again. I kind of like do want to party and like kind of like just like lie in my bed all day. So it's kind of a mental battle, but sometimes sometimes the rest battle wins. But it's no about knowing like when rest is turning into like I'm just using this as an excuse to be lazy kind of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to even take it a step further, though, to what you just said, like you want to be 19 and have fun and go out and socialize. how have you found, I don't like to use the word balance because I don't think that's a thing, especially when you really enjoy what you do. But how are you navigating that right now? Like knowing that you don't have the same path as a lot of your friends. And like for you, technically, when you're not working on something, like it means you always could be versus someone who does have the ability to kind of compartmentalize things if they have, let's say, a more traditional kind of job.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm lucky because since I'm young, that my sleeping schedule is very flexible, for lack of a better term. So it's like honestly, I do like go to sleep at a decent time on most days, but like on weekends, obviously I'll like try to like
You'll
sleep.
go out and push it a little
Yeah,
and then sleep
I'll push
in,
a little
right?
bit,
Yeah.
but normally like it's kind of the mindset of like, this isn't the best way to think, but it's what's worked for me. It's like grind now, and then like if you have plans later that day, it's like you got to get it out now, so that
Mhm.
way like you're kind of like rewarding yourself, and then you won't be able to like think, oh, like when you're actually like at the event or at the party or something like that, it's like it's not in the back of my head. It's like, ooh, I have to do that. Like, so just knowing that and kind of setting up my day to like prepare for it has helped me a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I say that to people all the time too with nutrition. It's so interesting. Like the people who say that they don't want to think about their food are usually the ones who are super resistant to planning. And I just had a couple of fellow nutrition coaches on my last episode of the show, and they were like, it's one of those things where it's like, hello, if you just planned, then you wouldn't have to think about the food anyways. So it's the same exact idea.
Exactly. It's like if I know I'm eating out that day, then you got to hit your protein before you go out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Well, and talking just kind of about like your friends and your social life too, the one other burning question that I have is like, what does your family think about all this? Like you having had the original plan to go to school, what did that conversation look like with your parents?
Yeah. So it was definitely something that I didn't want to bring up because it's an uncomfortable like conversation to be having. Funnily enough, like my mom was like, when is the next semester starting? And it was like winter break, and I had just finished my first semester of college, and she was just asking like, when are you going back to school? And I was like, better time than ever to to break the news. I was like, never. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, never. I
So
don't.
you had like really formulated the plan before
Yeah,
you even presented it to them.
yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
having that conversation, it was obviously a pretty conflicting interest, and I understand that like my parents want the best for me, and so that's kind of how I saw it. And from a couple of months going into like my entrepreneurship journey, it was a little bit tough for my mom to like understand it. And then with me like working and like me like actually pursuing this, she actually saw that, and then she understood like that I was serious about it.
So how's your relationship evolved, a full year plus later now that you're clearly demonstrating that you're giving this your all?
Yeah, so because of that, I feel like she's definitely been way more supportive than she was in the past. Just because like me physically showing her like it's crazy to like explain to like someone who's like a different generation, but like this is how I physically like make money online, and like
Right.
literally
Yeah, it
learn.
might not have like
Yeah,
it's not something she could have conceptualized, right? Especially not when she was your age.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I think it's important to bring that up because I think that a lot of times that's a big apprehension for people. Whether it is a parent or a friend or whoever, there's just so much of this focus on the external of like what will other people think. And I think you personally really embody like you're listening to yourself, learning like what works for you, Ria, and not worrying about how other people are going to take that. And I think there's a lot of people out there who struggle with that.
Yeah, it's like the biggest thing right now is like not worrying what other people think. With that's my a big piece of advice to I have to anyone. But I do think I need to wrap this one up.
Yes, I know. I want to be respectful of your time because you're a busy lady and we have a cutoff time that you have to run. So before you go, I like to do a super quick lightning round at the end of every episode. And then we're going to make sure we tell everybody where they can follow you, interact with you. We'll put it all down in the show notes too, because most importantly, if they want to check out any of the Bolt gear, they got to know where they can find it. So you ready for the lightning round?
Okay, let's go. I'm kind of nervous.
Perfect. All right. So we didn't talk a lot about your workout routine, but you said you spend 2 hours at the gym. So now I got to know, what is your favorite go-to lift? Like, what movement makes you just feel like the most powerful version of yourself?
Yeah, so that's an easy one. It's deadlifts, and I pull sumo deadlifts.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love a good deadlift. All right. Now, opposite. What's your least favorite? Like, what's one move that you're like, I know I got to do this, but I kind of dread it?
Do calves count?
Sure. They count.
I hate doing calves, and I really like. I need to start doing them though, because I gotta catch them up to the rest of my body.
What is your go-to? I don't like to use the term cheat meal because I don't believe in that with my nutrition philosophy, but maybe what's something you like to like splurge on, or like you really have to plan for it to fit into your day?
Yeah, so I'm a big chicken fettuccine girl, and
Oh,
it's
that's very specific.
super fatty, but I wish I could have it every day.
Nice. I like that. May have been one of my most unique answers I've ever gotten to this question. So I like that. I appreciate it.
It's a special day whenever I get to eat that.
Now, we talked a lot about obviously like hoodies and clothing and that sort of thing. Do you have like a favorite shoe? Do you have like a go-to sneaker that you are rocking in the gym when you're lifting?
I have been like a white Converse girl for the longest time. I do not think they'll
Classic.
stray away. It goes with everything.
Nice. Yeah, there you go. They're versatile. I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, last but not least, tell us where we can find you. Give me your Instagram handles, all that good stuff. And like I said, we'll be sure to link it down in the show notes so that everybody can go check out Bolt.
Okay. So my Instagram and TikTok is at Ria Patag, and that's RIAPATAG. And my Instagram for my brand is Wear Bolt Active. So that's WearBoltActive. And then just the website if you want to take a look and buy anything and check that out. It's boltactive.com. So that's BOLTACTIVE.com.
Amazing. Well, Ria, thank you again for sitting down with me, for joining me on the show, and for pursuing the opportunity to do this. You are clearly a strong, badass female, and you embody your brand every single day. And I think that's just incredible. I know that there's going to be a lot of FYX listeners who benefit from hearing this story and are just as inspired by it as I've been in getting to chat with you in the last hour and just sort of getting to know you over the last couple of weeks. So I'm sure this is not the last time we will connect, and we'll get to stay up to date on your journey. And I'm really excited for you. So thank you again for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And for all of our listeners out there, thank you guys for tuning in as you do every single week. If you enjoyed the show, reach out to Ria. I'm sure she would love to hear from you. I, as always, would love to hear from you. And you guys know where to find me on Instagram at @TheKristaHuber, or for the show itself, it's at thefix.officialpod. And we will catch you guys on our next episode from wherever you're listening from. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.